Hello everyone and welcome to our Moneyball series on Foot Manager 2023. Yes, we're going to be back doing Moneyball again this year. I absolutely loved doing my Moneyball save last year, both on YouTube and on Twitch when I was streaming last year. It was the most fun I'd ever had playing FM for content, and I think so many people love the attribute-less Moneyball concept, right? So we're going to be back doing it again this year. But a quick overview of Moneyball, what it actually is in real life and how you apply it in Foot Manager, at least in the way that I'm going to be doing it. So Moneyball was actually a book that was written, and it basically was a concept of applying stats purely to building teams, right? And the concept was thought about a little bit, it was debated a little bit. It was quite shut down by the baseball community. I'm a baseball fan myself, I'm a New York Mets fan, and it's something that I'd followed quite early on, actually. I'd come across the Moneyball concept around 2005, 2006, and a team called the Oakland A's were actually the first team to at least properly introduced the Moneyball concept to their team. And the Oakland A's were a team that overachieved quite a lot for the size of the club. Now in baseball, there is technically a salary cap. There's where you can get around it. It's called a luxury tax. So there actually is a salary cap in baseball, but it's weirdly done. It's done like this. So think of it like there's a salary cap that's like here, and there's like a space you can go above it, but then it's called a luxury tax. So for example, I'm making up this actual number, but think of it in this sort of way. Let's just say whatever league you're in, whatever sport it is, your team can pay up to £100 million or dollars up to that level without any punishment. Right, that is the cap, essentially. Now, you can pay more than that. You can pay more than 100 million, but let's say to pay another £10 million or dollars in wages on a player, you've actually then got to pay £20 million because 10 million of it is actually tax. So you get up to 100 million. The 100 million that you spend goes straight to the players, but for every pound or dollar you spend on top of that, you've got to pay another pound or dollar on top of it in tax, essentially. So that's sort of how it worked roughly in luxury tax. So I don't know the exact percentages, but that's roughly how it works. Is you can spend as much as you want, but it costs you a lot of money to spend past the salary cap, but people do it. The New York Mets are a team that are doing it this year. But anyway, go back to the origins of Moneyball. Yes, there was a team that were like, we want to compete, but we're in a tough sport. How do we compete against the very top teams in the sport when we are competing with a third, a quarter, or even a fifth of the budget of some of the top sides, depending on what season it is, etc. So they decided to go all in on this Moneyball concept. And what they did is they went purely off of stats to recruit players and put a team together, right? Which upset a lot of people because it meant that players that the media or fans particularly liked, their output statistically wasn't at the level that the perception was. So those players were going, they're bringing in players that people didn't really fancy. But from a stats point of view, they provided what they were looking for, right? So you can see how that could upset a lot of people going through it the first time, think of it in football terms. Now, where baseball is different to football, baseball, there aren't too many variables, right? You've got one pitcher, one batter, one hitter, and then the field, which is, there are some variations you can have, which is something called the shift, but pretty much the field's going to stay quite similar to how it is. So the variables are cut right down in baseball. Now in football, you've got 22 players on a field, and they're constantly moving or on the pitch all the time. And on top of that, in football, obviously, you play in possession, you play out of possession, and you play in transition. In some sports, you only play one side of the ball, or you get rotated quite a lot throughout the game. Whereas in football, apart from the subs that come on, for quite a lot of the important players anyway in the team, they're going to play the whole match, and they're going to play on the ball, off the ball, and everything in between. So it's a lot harder to apply to just a statistical framework to something like that. But that's what we're going to do here. Now, there's quite a few misconceptions when it comes to Moneyball. Now, in essence, Moneyball is about finding value. It is primarily about finding value. Now, so what that means is we're trying to find players based on stats only, purely on their statistical output, but their valuation has to be factored into it, right? So if you find somebody who scores the perfect stats for how you want to build your team, but they're going to cost you £200 million, that's where, is there actually value there? What the Oakland A's did, which was really good, is they were finding value. They couldn't compete pound for pound. What they were able to do, though, is find value where every player that they got, their stats were above what the perceived market value was for those players. That's how they were able to compete with a much disadvantaged budget. So it's one, about finding the stats for the players that we're looking for and the positions and the roles that we're looking for within our system of play and style of play, but also making sure that it's of value to us. And in football, where there's more variables, it's more important than ever to make sure you get that part down. Where the connection from baseball to football comes in is, so after the Oakland A's had tried it and succeeded from their perspective, because they were able to compete still as a top side, even though they didn't have the budget, they didn't quite ever win the World Series. However, the Boston Red Sox, a few years later, did apply the Moneyball concept and did win the World Series. And who owns the Boston Red Sox? The same owners as Liverpool. And I mentioned this in the last video last year, but I'll just say it again in case those of you that have seen this for the first time. Liverpool's owners took over Liverpool in 2010, wasn't it? And they took over a team that had just gone through a slightly weird period. They were title challengers in 08-09 under Benitez with a pretty good team. Went through a couple of rocky years, and they took over a club that needed a complete rebrand and refresh, really. Now, one crucial thing about stats is sample size. Now, if you watch the film that came out in 2011 with Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill, they mentioned this very briefly at one part of the film, and the book came out in 2003, but the film came out in 2011. Now, sample size is very important. For example, when Liverpool's owners took over in 2010, let's just say they wanted to use a 10-year sample size for stats, and they were looking through things like assist type, goal type, area of goals scored in the Premier League in 2010. If you go back 10 years, that was 2000. Now, look at the difference in football from 2000 to 2010. In the year 2000, mostly all teams in England played a form of a 4-4-2. Everybody had one big man, one slightly smaller man up front, and two wingers to get the balls into the box. In 2010, football had completely changed in England because of mainly Jose Mourinho coming to England and dominating English football for 2 years, playing a three-man midfield, which then triggered United to adjust to it, and then Arsene Wenger had gone through a evolution of his own football as well at Arsenal. Football was completely different in 2010 to 2000. So you can see where the problems occur when you do pick just pure stats in a game like football that has so many variables. So for example, let's just take that example of assist type and goal area. If you were to look at a 10-year period of goals that were scored from 2010 to 2000, I'm going to guess a lot of goals were scored via a cross and a ball into the box and wide area. Not always necessarily right on the sideline and bylines, but a lot of them would be in that direction, right? So you can see the thinking here, can't you, between Liverpool's owners in the early days, like who created the most chances from wide areas in the last few years? Stuart Downing, great, let's get him in. Who was the biggest threat in aerial challenges and central zones near the goal in the box? Andy Carroll, bang, get him in. On paper, that might work over a 10-year period looking from 2010 to 2000, but does it work from 2008 to 2010? That's a different question. I mean, they could have tried to look at future trends around Europe and look to, for example, Pep Guardiola's Barcelona. But the problem with that at that point was that a lot of people saw Barcelona as this brand new thing that was coming out, and that it would be not impossible, but very difficult to replicate that, especially over a short period. But I mean, even if they looked at the last 5 years in Europe, from 2005 to 2010, England had a team in the final or two in 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, and 2010 was the first year they didn't have anybody in the final. So if you're looking at what league would be the best one to copy in terms of statistics and domination of both domestic and continental competitions, the Premier League was right there in terms of that, They had winners 2005, they had a finalist 2006, a finalist 2007, two finalists with one winner in 2008, finalist 2009, and then obviously 2010, they didn't have anybody. You can see how they went about it and why they went about it, but for us as football fans, long-term football fans, we all know there are so many variables with how football moves that you can't just do that. I think that sparked an evolution of like how then you have to start looking at stats because like the Oakland days in 2003, they were the first ones to really look at stats and use stats. People always looked at stats in baseball. It's a very stats-heavy sport, but it was the kind of stats they were using. And I saw an interview with Rafa Benitez where he spoke about how like when he was at Valencia in 2003-04, how then and even at Liverpool, they had like video footage and statistics on players and where they took penalties and for penalty shootouts. And he said that when he spoke to other coaches at that time, nobody else was doing that in 2004. So whenever somebody's been ahead of the game in terms of stats in some area, those teams, managers, organizations always tend to do well from it if they get ahead of the game. Now in football, the difference is that stats, everybody has access to stats now. Everybody does. So it's not about necessarily getting hold of the stats, it's how you're using it to your team, and your team specifically. And that's what we're going to focus on here. Everybody has stats, how are you going to utilize them to your style of football, your philosophy? How are you going to tailor it to yourself and maximize your output from the stats that everybody else can get? That's the new conundrum for teams in Europe, because everybody has access to the stats these days. Now, Stats Foot Manager. Now, there's one thing that wasn't mentioned during the game's release, but the stats this year are completely different and improved this year. There's so much more level and depth to the stats. It's absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love it. I've been wanting to do a Moneyball save since day one, but I knew I was going to get to it. And once I got to a Moneyball save, there's nothing else I want to do except for the Burton save, which is a youth-only save. That's different. But like these two saves are going to be my saves from now until the end. If we do finish this Moneyball save before the end of the FM23 cycle, I will do a second one because I love these saves. They're brilliant. But yeah, there are so many new stats this year. And there is a link where you can see and read them all, which is done on the byline, mainly by FM Stag, but maybe some others will write about it as well, where you can read all of the new stats and have them explained to you. And I also was on a podcast explaining what some of the new ones are and how they work, etc. So I could link you to that as well in the description. To give you just one example, and this I think is the biggest one, last year, if you use stats in FM to recruit players, especially a creative player, for example, you would look at maybe key passes, right? The problem with key passes in FM22 was that it would include set pieces, right? So you could see a player that could have, you have two players on, let's just say 11 key passes for the year, right? One of those players could be quite creative and the other player could do nothing the entire match, but he takes set pieces, so he's got 10 or 11 key passes, whatever it is. And how would you know? Unless you wanted to go through and figure out game by game who did what, you're never going to know if they took set pieces or not. So this is what was introduced is open play key passes. Now, that on its own, for anybody that uses stats in Foot Manager, is a game changer because it tells you straight away, is that player creative in one stat really for you in terms of the chances that are being created. There's some great information now to be seen on the stats. We'll get into them in a second, but for now, let's talk about the team. Why have we chosen Paris FC for this save? Paris FC are a team that play in the second tier of French football. There are a few teams that I considered for it, but Paris FC are brilliant because it's the ultimate Moneyball versus Moneybags save, right? You've got Paris FC and our fierce rivals, as it says in the club information. Our fierce rivals are PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, who are known for being one of the richest teams in the world and having arguably the best player of all time. Some people would say definitely is. Some people would debate it. But anyway, they've got players like Messi. They've got one of the best squads in the world. They've got the most money. And it's like the ultimate us versus them sort of save, isn't it? I just thought there couldn't be a single better team to be. And this is almost like on another level because you've got obviously PSG, who are well known to sign every big wonder kid in the game. So we're going to have, not only are they going to be a very big foe and a big opponent right off the bat, but I think as the seasons go on, they're going to continuously get better and better. They're going to be one of the better AI-built sides, aren't they, in the game because of the reputation of the club, the finances, and all that kind of stuff, right? So it is the ultimate challenge for us. It's the ultimate challenge. We've got basically no money. The club has got 1 million in the bank balance, and we've got no debt. So we're a club that spends within our means, just like Moneyball, and we are going to rely purely on stats to recruit our team, put it together, and challenge the richest team in world football. There is one huge issue with this save, and you can see here our preseason prediction is to finish 9th. You can, okay, that's not too bad. That's all right, Jack. What's the big issue here? The big issue is this. The board want us to win promotion to Liga 1. Now, I'm not sure about you, but I think that's pretty harsh, to be honest. And I don't know how good the squad is exactly because we can't see the attributes. As you can see here, it's all blacked out. If you want to know how to do this, you can download a skin, or I don't use downloaded skins. I use the game's default one. If you go to preferences here, if you type in skin C, so after you type in skin C, it's going to show you this. You click skin colors, and this is what you're going to see here. So you're going to click show advanced settings, and this is going to be what you see here. Now, you see where it says A, you're going to go there, and you're just going to click zeros on all of those. Click confirm, and there you are. It's going to go just like that for you, and that's how you do it without downloading a skin. In terms of our actual squads, you can see here, it's a pretty big squad, which is good because we're not going to sign anybody. So I've started the save at the start of the season, but I'm just going to go straight through the first game of the season. We're not going to buy anybody, probably in the first transfer window at all, and we'll start our I guess, proper Moneyball aspect to it from January onwards. But there's a lot of pressure on the first season because if we're not in the race for promotion, we're going to get put under pressure immediately by the board, which is not great. In that sense, they're not the best team to be in terms of that, but in terms of the story, which is what I want this to be, they are the best team. And I've just got to hope that I'm able to do well enough to stay in the job for us all to carry on. So it's going to be interesting to see. In terms of the tactic, I'm probably going to use the same tactic as I've been using in my Burton save. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to stick to this tactic throughout the whole save, and it's the same with the Burton one, actually. I could end up changing from that depending on the players that I get. It's like what we've got here is two completely different saves. You've got one save with Burton where I have to stick with the same players, and it's a no-signing save, and a Moneyball save where we are going to basically show no loyalty to the players because we're only going to be buying players based on stats. But both of them are going to be fitting into the same tactic at least early on, so that'd be quite interesting to see. But I can go through this tactic at a later date. I've already gone through it once in my other series, and I'm happy to go through it again before maybe the start of the season, the next episode, but before you start the game. But we'll leave that for now. But I'll do explain how it all works and the ideas behind it. So how is this going to work in FM then? So first of all, we're going to have no attributes on the players. Now, how exactly this goes is up to you. On my Twitch saves, I had it so I didn't show the attributes at all until the final season. And what I would do is at the end of every season, I'd make a new save file. So at the end of this season, I'll save it as Paris FC Season 1 and so on and so forth. And then right at the end of the save, I was able to go back through each season and see how the players actually developed year on year and how good they really were. Now, as a viewer, though, I don't know if you want to see the players develop and see how good they are after like a short period of time. So in my YouTube series last year, we did it every year. Then I changed it to every 2 years. Now, I think what's good is to do it something like every 2 or every 3 years because then you get to see how good the players were that I actually were using fairly recently, but also it doesn't give it away to me how good they really are. I'll leave that up to you. My first plan in my head is to do it every maybe 2 or 3 years, something like that. We'll do a big attribute reveal every 2 or 3 seasons. Some players we would have signed that season, we do get to see them after 1 year, but that's just luck, I guess. We'll use different custom views. This will be my main view because this covers almost everything. You've got the generic like appearances, goals, assists. Then we've got our sort of shooting section, our creative section, open play key passes, progressive passes per 90, that kind of stuff. Then dribbling and crossing in here, tackling and defending here, aerial stuff here, and then a bit of physicals there. So that's how I'm going to structure it. Then what will happen is when I'm searching for players, what I will do eventually, and for searching players, I've just put this together as an example. This isn't really what I would necessarily have, but I would have a view like this for each position that I'm using. So I'd have one for strikers, one for attacking midfielders, one for fullbacks, one for centre backs, etc. It goes on, right? For every position, I'd have a different view, and I would have stats for that view exactly, right? So you would go through and you'd look for players based on stats and use these sort of views here to create it. Now, what information would I use to put in there? Do I just guess? I don't just guess. There's 2 main ways we're going to do it. For example, here, if we were to go up, what I would do is I'd look at, right, okay, we're going up. We're going to be favourites to go down or be in a relegation fight. So what I would do is after the season finishes, I'd pick, for example, I don't know, maybe the team that finishes 10th, 11th, and 12th. I pick those 3 teams there. And what I would do is I would take, for example, I would take the top performing striker in each 3 team, and then I would calculate all their stats together. So, for example, I would add all of their shots on target ratio together, and I'd divide it by 3. Why would I do that? Because if you were to pick one team, what you could end up happening is there might be an outlier. There might be a striker that's doing really well because he's actually compensating for the fact that his team's wingers are bad and all the balls go through the middle to him. So if you take 3 teams, it's a big enough of a sample size where you sort of eliminate the outliers. Does it get rid of it completely? No, but it gives you an idea. So the idea would be then, if you do have a striker that has all of these stats that we're going to look at for a striker done and then divided by 3, if we can find a striker that has those stats, that should be a striker good enough for us to finish mid-table in the French top division. That's the idea. Okay, so this is me doing it last year on my Moneyball save. Look at the difference here between me then and now. Crazy, isn't it? Right, but what you can see there, don't have to worry about the information too much, but what you can see on the screen is you can see me taking 3 players. We're challenging for the title at the time, so you can see me taking 3 different strikers from the first place, second place, and third place teams. And you can see me taking all the stats that I look at for a striker. You can see me adding them all up, and then I divide them all by 3 to create the amount that I want, but that's just me doing it there. And then that's where it comes out. So you've got me there taking, I've got Rashford, Salah, and Haaland's stats here. You can see them. I've just copied and pasted it straight from the game, which I can show you how to do at a later day. I won't do it right now because this video will be long enough as it is, but we'll go through this at a later date if you want to know exactly how to do it. So we take the data straight from the game using Excel, and then you can see here that I've got goals, penalties, goals per 90, shots per 90, shot on target ratio, XG, dribbles per 90, and I'm not going to say them all the rest there. But the top number below the names is the numbers added together, and then the bottom one is divided by 3. So I've taken 3 players, I've added their numbers together, and I've given myself the bottom line. So that's also a big thing about Moneyball, right? It's about getting your bottom line. You're trying to find something. How do you get to that bottom line number? That's how I did it there. That's one way that we can do it, and we get to a bottom line that way, because that's what's working. That's what worked that year to finish in that position in that league. So that's what you're aiming for, right? The second way is using something from my good friend FM Stag. So FM Stag did a blog where he investigated, he spent a lot of time investigated what is that bottom line across the top leagues in FM. So rather than taking 3 teams to an average, he went and took multiple players from the top 5 divisions, I think it was. He can correct me in the comments if any of this is wrong. But yeah, he took the top 5 divisions and he put it all together. He wanted to get it down to one number for each position, each role. He wanted to get things down to one number. Show me the metrics. So after many hours of collecting numbers, here is the result, he says. These stats here, which are trademarked by FM Stag, don't forget, trademark FM Stag, these here are the numbers that he's already done. So he's done a lot of the hard work. Now, he didn't work hard enough to do it for us in FM22, but he did do it for us in FM23, so thank you to Stag for that. So yeah, that's another thing we can look at. So when we go up and get promoted, we could look at this as well. Maybe I don't do my own way this year. Maybe I just do Stag's version. Maybe we do both and compare and see if there's a big difference. But yeah, because Stag has got a high, medium, and low rating for the position, That's pretty good. So we're definitely going to use FM Stag stuff here throughout the save this year. And yeah, big shout out to him. If you don't follow him, please do follow him on Twitter. He's one of the best content creators around. And on that note as well, last year after my Moneyball series went out, a lot of people started to do Moneyball content, and it's brilliant. That's exactly what I wanted it to be. RDF Tactics himself did a Moneyball series not long after mine, and he gave me a huge shout out and said that he was inspired by my content, which is brilliant. And I love RDF. Big shout out to you as well, mate. And it sort of set off a way for other people to start their own Moneyball content, which was absolutely brilliant. And the big thing I wanted to I said at the time, and I mentioned it subsequently, and I definitely mention it again now, like, I was never the first person to invent Moneyball and FM. It's been done many times. I think the first time I read about it was in like middle 2000s, like 2006 or 7. I think it was 2006. It was the first year that FM had Team Talks, and somebody was writing about doing a Moneyball save. The growth of my channel didn't start with me working at Sports Interactive. If you actually look, when I started working at Sports Interactive, there was basically no change on my channel at all. It was never that. But the Moneyball series is what changed everything. And especially when other people started to do it and they'd seen that I'd already had like this long series going. So I absolutely love Moneyball series. They're my favorite thing to do. And the Burton save, I'm absolutely loving. It's something brand new to me, but it's not something that I normally do. This is something I normally do, especially for content. And I can't wait to do it again. I can't wait to get into this. It's going to be a lot of pressure on the early results in the first season. Although the first season will have less of the Moneyball aspect, there's going to be a lot of pressure on the actual results. There's going to be an interesting aspect to the Let's Play aspect of it in the first year, and the Moneyball stuff will take over after that. But it's the same as the Barnsley save from last year. We're in the second tier of a nation, and we've got to try and get ourselves promoted. There's no point in going through any of the players because we can't see them. No point in going through the staff because we can't see them. So I think we're going to leave it there. So we'll come back next episode. We'll come back for the first game of the season. We'll go through the tactic. That's something we will definitely do, and I'll go through it again for those who haven't seen me go through it elsewhere. And we'll see how we do. And that is going to finish the first episode. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all for the first game of the season.